Hey, let's start the show.
For Thursday, February 16th, 2017. Welcome to This Is Only a Test, the official podcast of Tested.com. Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode. I'm Norm, and if you're watching the video, you will already know that it's a strange week indeed this week. I'm joined by our one and only guest, Steve Lin.
Thank you very much. Glad to be back.
Yeah, I looked through my entire Rolodex, and I said, oh, you know what? I only want Steve on next week.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's because Jeremy and Kishore are both out on vacation today. Jeremy is, I believe, in Anaheim. He's at Disney with family. Right. Kishore, I believe, is in Boston. And you were a guest when I was on vacation, when I was in Florida.
Right. Well, scraping the bottom of the barrel. But
No. There was
happy to come back.
Yeah, and when I listened to that episode that you were on,
Mm-hmm.
I told Kishore and Jeremy all I wanted to do the entire time was chime in.
Oh, right.
Was like when you were talking about your trip to the Japan
Mm-hmm.
and all your thoughts on the Switch. I was like, I wish I was there. So I have that option this week.
Yeah.
So basically, we're going to talk about what happened 3 weeks ago, and go over the exact same
Go back
topics.
in time, right?
Go back in time. No. Maybe a little bit not. But before we get started, how are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Yeah. You, for people who don't know, who just tuned in and didn't listen to past episodes, Steve, you've been a longtime friend of Tested, not only a provider of Pocky and
Right.
provider of treats, and even the infamous Civet Poo coffee.
Right.
But a collector of arcade games, a pinball aficionado. You worked in the video games business, ran a studio, and now you're kind of roaming the earth these days.
Yeah, I'm doing more with the Video Game History Foundation, which we talked about on the previous podcast. But yeah, a big collector. I actually met Jeremy before all this through the pinball community. So he and I have traded a couple of machines back and forth.
California Extreme, that's
Yes.
your jam. How much traveling do you do for conventions, and what are the big ones? If I wanted to go, I know about California Extreme, but if I wanted to do a tour of the big arcade and pinball conventions in the US, where would be my destinations?
Oh, that's a good question. The best video game console collection, actually they do have a lot more arcade and pinball now, is Portland Retro Gaming Expo. By far one of the best, actually the best in the country. And there's also MagFest on the East Coast. The thing Jeremy talks about, the Papa event in Pittsburgh is fantastic for pinball. And then there's a bunch of others. Those are the ones that I kind of attend on a regular basis. And of course, California Extreme, which I've been doing now for, I guess, 15, 20 years.
So you really do make a circuit of these things, just like I get to go to pop culture conventions, Comic-Cons. You go to the arcade conventions.
Yeah.
Do you bring games there? Do you look for games to buy? What do you usually? I mean, what keeps it fresh?
For the local stuff, I'll bring games. I load up a truck every California Extreme and bring a bunch of things in. Actually, you can see we're all getting older because this year, as we unloaded games, I think I'm getting too old for this. But before the old conventions like Classic Gaming Expo and things like that, I would buy a lot of stuff. But now that we've started the nonprofit, and actually, quite frankly, my collection is pretty much done. I'm really there to be on panels. We do this thing called Retro Game Roadshow, which is like Antiques Roadshow, but people bring in their games and we kind of tell them the history and what it's worth.
Oh, that's great.
Things like that.
Is that documented anywhere? Is that filmed, or is that just for the show?
We have a couple, I think, that are filmed. We've definitely had people bring in things that are really crazy. So
oh my God.
That's a lot of fun.
When I hear that, all I want is like, where is that show on YouTube? And why aren't we producing that show, Steve?
It's been pitched a couple times. I think it's just a matter of getting people to bring things in and where to go. So the retro game conventions are really the best place for that.
Yeah, and do you often have other like for the equivalent again, so I always bring it to the pop culture conventions. Are there guests like people who worked on the games, worked on the art? Is that part of it as well?
For ours, we did have a couple special guests who kind of popped in to say, "Oh yeah, by the way, I worked on that or I programmed that." Those people are usually at the convention as well, doing their own panels on kind of the history of whatever they worked on. So it's great to get crossover, and if something comes up, a lot of times we'll match the person that brought it in with the creator, and it's like, by the way, here's the guy who actually made it, and you can get more of the history.
I was recently at a game studio. I can't talk about too many details, but a long-running game studio, and one of the people there had a collection of, or had worked on a lot of games. And they had in their office just boxes of old games that they had worked on, and they said each box could be a book, could be of stories about getting the license to make this game, all the back and forth, all like, and we have seen, like, I love looking into like old like books. I think they've done it for a couple big games, Doom, obviously, but every game that you feel like has a story to it.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something we've been trying to do through the nonprofit is collect. We have a lot of artifacts and a lot of paperwork, and one of the things we're trying to do now is a lot of the oral history. So taking what we know there and trying to get more of the story around, obviously popular titles. Doom is a really good example of something that's very well covered, but then also things that are maybe seminal, but not as exciting, at least at first glance, and then kind of diving in and getting real deep on the history of that.
What have you been doing lately as a part of the museum, the history?
So we are getting ready to make a pretty big announcement. I'd say probably in the next week and a half or so. So keep an eye out, gamehistory.org and my Twitter account.
Oh, very cool. Well, I mentioned pop culture, of course, that perfect way to jump into our pop culture segment. I'm running all the sound this week, so it may not be perfect, but I think this is it. Oh no, I don't have my sound on. Give me 1 second. This is what happens when Jeremy leaves. He's in charge of the sound these days.
Right.
1 second.
Refresh.
Pop culture, news culture.
So, have you watched any movies?
I watched a really terrible movie with you guys, but nothing new. So.
Oh, okay, yeah. We hung out last week after the podcast, and we watched Jack Reacher 2.
Never Go Back.
Never Go Back. And
Never Go Back.
I am an unabashed Tom Cruise fan. I apologize. I apologize for suggesting it. I really enjoy the first Jack Reacher film. It was directed by Christopher McQuarrie, who wrote Usual Suspects, and he wrote the Tom Cruise movie Edge of Tomorrow, otherwise known as All You Need Is Kill, otherwise known as Tomorrow Never, or what was it called? What did they rename it again to? Live, Die, Kill, or Live, Die, Repeat.
Right. I think that was the poster, right?
Yes. I think and he also directed the last Mission Impossible movie, which I loved. And so loved Jack Reacher 1. And I had such high hopes for Jack Reacher 2. It was garbage.
It was awful.
I didn't know how this movie got made. Like,
well, how it was made, right? It's Tom Cruise and all that, and the Chinese investment money, right?
It was so, all the exciting, and like, those movies are based off books. I haven't read the books. I know there are people who are huge fans of the Jack Reacher books, and maybe this was based on a book that they sold on the strength of the source material, which not very strong for a movie, and they sold on the strength of Tom Cruise's star power. But it was just about lazy writing, lazy action.
The best green screen.
Oh my God, green screen effects. You could see like they just didn't pay for the nice compositing. You could see the edge of people's hair, green screen as they were in cars in the backgrounds. It was a great movie to do like a riffs track style commentary for.
Which we basically started doing.
It ended up being the case.
Yeah, pretty much like 10, 20 minutes in.
But I will justify watching that movie, having watched that movie, because that was the perfect way to clean my palate, to prepare myself for John Wick 2.
Right.
Which, if you talk about actors in their 50s, Tom Cruise is like 54, Keanu Reeves is 52. They're in their 50s making action films. Keanu Reeves has it down, and it is John Wick 2. Amazing.
Yeah, what was the joke before it came out? It was like John Wick 2, John gets a cat.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
There's another
right.
dog in it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. He got to get to the second dog at the end of the first one, which not a big spoiler. You should have watched the first one by now. I'm not going to talk too in depth about the film, but I recommend everyone should watch it. Watch the first film first. You've seen John Wick 1.
Yes, I have seen John Wick 1.
You're going to love John Wick 2. It's everything you love about the first film, but they were more ambitious. And I really wanted to go into a spoiler cast territory with Adam and Will this week, but we may save that for a future episode when they've both watched it. The other thing I will say is, if you don't know the story of how those movies got made, John Wick 1 was directed by two people. They were both stuntmen.
Oh.
So they were stuntmen and stunt choreographers that then took a script and then directed, I believe their first film was John Wick. And since then, the two directors have split apart to work on separate projects. One of the directors is now, he finished a film, a Cold War film that's coming out later this year with Charlize Theron, I want to say. And he's actually was picked up to direct Deadpool 2.
Okay.
So high hopes for Deadpool 2
Right.
for that. And the other director, the co-director, was when he did Solo for John Wick 2.
John Wick 2. All right.
So he still has, I think it was the same writer who worked on both films. But the thing about John Wick 2 is the action scenes. So remember, John Wick 1 was all about these crazy, frenetic gunfights where like he would have these, it would be like precision shooting, but like chaos and it was so stylistic. But it would be these long takes also.
Right.
So,
Like, it was kind of like The Raid, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Except instead of punching, it'd be
Right.
shooting. Highly choreographed. John Wick 2, you still have that. And what the director really wanted to do again was pull the camera back and let the camera just sit there and show the action. So it's a lot of these wide shots. They shot the really sharp colors, really colorful action too. So their part of the movie takes place in Rome. There are different interior, outdoor, but all the lighting for the environments are they're in the shot. So if a light's on an actor, and there's a lot of dark scenes because he runs through catacombs.
Right.
But if there's light in an actor, you see the light in the shot. Like there are LED strips everywhere. Like even in the subway stations and in the subway trains, you see like LED strips, which add this nice mood to it. And it's very like blue and red, but it's beautifully shot, beautifully choreographed. And there's some great YouTube videos of Keanu Reeves training.
Yeah, I did see those where he's got the automatic weapon and kind of just things are popping up and he's going through there.
Yeah, and also just like the people who trained him, you could tell he just ran through those sequences over and over and over, never complained. He sees like he's wearing sweats. He does the move. It's a very, I think it's a standard tactical move where you pull the gun out of your holster and aim it both hands forward, and your knees are bent and your whole body is stiff. And there's a video clip of him doing that like a dozen times. Not doing it great because all he needs to do is the one time for camera.
Right. But he wants to have that muscle memory.
The muscle memory, yeah. And if you go back to Collateral, did you ever see the Michael Mann movie Collateral?
Yeah.
Tom Cruise does that same move. And apparently, I saw a post on Reddit that Tom Cruise's execution of that move is so perfect that it's used in some training classes. Apocryphal, maybe not true, but but the rumor is that clip is used as a way to illustrate the right way to do it.
Oh, geez.
Like both actors who are determined, who are very committed to their craft. But if you compare John Wick 2 and Jack Reacher 2, spend your money on John Wick 2.
Yeah. And everything we hear about Keanu Reeves, he just becomes more and more like super cool guy.
Yeah. I saw two movies. Did you see the other movie?
I did not see the other big movie. The number one movie.
Was it the number one movie this weekend?
Number one movie was the one you're going to talk about. John Wick was number 3.
Oh, that's right, because there was the 50 Shades of Grey sequel that came out.
Right.
Lego Batman came out over the weekend. And now, I assume you also saw the Lego movie.
I did see the Lego movie, yes.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah, it was really good. I was pleasantly surprised. I didn't know what to expect. I thought it was a kiddie movie, but there's a lot for adults to enjoy in there.
I think the creative team behind that, Chris Miller, Phil Lord, they know how to write clever movies that are going to appeal to kids with the theme. I mean, it's
like
Lego.
Pixar.
Miracle,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it can be a little subversive also.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't direct or write the Lego Batman movie. I believe that was Adam McKay who directed it, and he did Adam McKay did Ant-Man. He did Talladega Nights. So he knows comedy, but it's really well written. Some of the best moments in the Lego Batman movie are when they poke fun at all the iterations of Batman.
Okay.
So it's
Some like Adam West all on. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And so they definitely acknowledge it's like a meta film. Like those movies are films, self-aware films to some extent,
Right.
Because they're in a Lego, their own universe. Like those characters are Lego builders. They
Right. Any like stare at the camera moments, or like breaking the fourth wall, or
not breaking the fourth wall. Nothing to the extent that the Lego movie did. It wasn't as conceptual as that. It's a little more straightforward, but it's definitely the universe itself is very self-aware with all the jokes. Like Batman is not the brooding character. He's the very the Will Arnett Batman that was in the Lego movie.
So it's that Batman.
It's that Batman. It's the pompous, like, I'm awesome Batman.
Right.
Like everything is dark Batman.
Do we have a Batman origin story told in Lego?
It's not the Batman origin story,
Okay.
but it is the Robin origin story.
Oh.
So Michael Cera, who is unrecognizable as Robin, voice-wise, unrecognizable as Michael Cera, plays Robin. It's fantastic, and it's about Robin's journey is the thing that it's Batman's light, like the arc is Batman's character arc, but plot-wise it's Robin's story.
Robin's story. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, number one at the box office, and they said this week, I forget what it's going up against, but we'll see.
Yeah, I hope it does well. I know they have like a Lego Ninjago film. They had a trailer for that. The thing that I love for those films as animation films, they're so gorgeous.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how Warner Brothers did it. Whatever shaders they use, like it looks like the epitome of stop motion in Lego. Well,
when I first saw the Lego movie, for a minute, I was like, is this CG or is this stop motion? Because I couldn't tell. They only used official Lego pieces, no sort of custom pieces. And then as you see in different scenes, like, okay, there's no way they animated this.
I think Jeremy said when the first time he watched it, he thought it was stop motion. He told his son, they're actually moving individual pieces,
blocks.
like Leica would do it.
Right.
But it is that kind of the perfect, if you had a camera that was invisible that could get up as close as you could, and you could control lighting and build as many pieces. It's what that stop motion, how you think in your head it should look like. And they even go so far with the lighting to show like the sheen of Lego, like in the wear, you worn Lego pieces.
Well, like Spaceman, right? He had the broken thing.
Scratches.
Yeah, right.
But if you take a photo, you perfectly light a Lego piece and you hold a minifig and you photograph it or film video of it to try to make it look like Lego Batman movie or the Lego movie, it would be very difficult. You wouldn't get those same scratches. It would look much cleaner than than what they rendered in the film.
Right. It'd be funny if you could see like the reflection of a camera or something inside one of the character, that weird, like a boom mic or something dropping it. But yeah, I thought Lego Movie was amazing, and I'm really excited to see this one.
You gotta watch it. Two recommendations. I did the thing I promised I would do, which watch. I watched both.
Oh, which one did you watch first?
So I watched John Wick first.
Okay.
And Lego Batman was the palate cleanser. I did John Wick first partly because we watched Jack Reacher.
Right.
I needed to go right from the sour taste in my mouth of Jack Reacher to the awesomeness of John Wick 2 and then the joyfulness of Lego Batman. I was exhausted by the end. I like John Wick 2 more.
Yeah. Okay.
And I really enjoyed Lego Batman, but John Wick 2 was like, if I'm going to go back and see one of those films again, it would be John Wick 2.
And I wonder how much Jack Reacher contributed to that. It's like we talked, is like eating bitter melon, which is this Chinese dish that tastes awful because anything you eat after that tastes amazing. So maybe that was the case.
It's the M berry.
Yes.
The M berry before the fruit of Wick.
Right.
Speaking of Batman films, the next Batman film is, as announced by Warner Brothers, is The Batman. Batfleck. Well, may not be Batfleck.
Okay.
So after Ben Affleck's last movie, they did Live by Night. He wrote and directed it, came out, it bombed. I think it has, according to Box Office Mojo, the biggest theater reduction week to week. Like the Warner Brothers took it out of 90% of theaters of screens from first week to second week because no one went the first week and it was too wide of a release. It should have been released as like a indie film because it was more of a passion project, and maybe Warner didn't spend enough to market it.
But I don't even know what this is. That's like
it was his
Jiggly 2 or something.
mobster movie.
All right.
Yeah. It was Ben Affleck's One for Me, One for You. That was the one for him. So after that, and maybe these things are not exactly correlated, but he took himself out of the chair for directing the Batman.
Oh,
so he said he issued a statement. He said it was going to be too much work to do both because it's he has too much on his plate. He wanted to focus on the character and and he couldn't do both directing and acting at the same time. Which I can get, it makes some sense. But part of me also thinks that Warner Brothers took it away from him because, I mean, he lost money on Live by Night. So the rumor was that they were going to offer it to Matt Reeves.
okay. Who's Matt Reeves?
Cloverfield.
Oh,
Dawn of Planet of the Apes and Rise of Planet of the Apes.
all right.
Did you see either of those?
I did.
I like both of those a lot. I
Right.
thought the last Planet of the Apes movie was fantastic.
Right.
Set in San Francisco.
Wait, so when you say Cloverfield, you mean Cloverfield or Cloverfield Lane?
Cloverfield.
Okay.
Cloverfield Lane is Dan. What's his name? Who did the Portal short? Who was part of?
I can't remember.
Dan Trachtenberg.
Okay.
Who was part of? Who was a podcaster. He
Oh.
did. He along with Alex Albrecht and did Totally Rad Show. It was a Techzilla style show about pop culture.
Mhm.
And then he directed a Portal short film, and then he was going to do Why the Last Man,
Mhm.
and then surprise he came out with Cloverfield Lane,
Okay.
Cloverfield Lane, which I also enjoyed.
All right.
Yeah.
So the next Batman film, though, is not him.
It's Matt Reeves, which I think would be great. It's probably gonna be great. But new rumors now, and these are still rumors, is that Ben Affleck wants out of the Batman role
completely.
I think he's contractually obligated to do the Batman
Right.
and Justice League, and the Justice League is already filmed.
Right.
But Justice League was supposed to be multiple films, but the rumor is that he wants he's done with the role, which would be a huge blow
Yeah.
to
I mean,
the DC cinematic universe.
I thought he was really good as Batman.
I think he was the best part of
Batman versus
it was
Superman.
surprisingly, right?
Yeah.
Like the internet arc from announcement of Ben Affleck as Batman to the release of Batman v Superman.
Right.
Like everyone was on Team Affleck.
Right.
It was almost like, I guess it's the modern equivalent of the Michael Keaton.
Oh,
Casting.
right. Yeah, because I remember when that happened. Oh,
Yeah, I don't. So tell me about that. Like 1989, Tim Burton's Batman,
Right.
announcement of Beetlejuice's Batman. What was the reception
Yeah,
like?
it's like Mr. Mom is Batman, right? It's just, I remember being really confused by it because I could not picture what that would look like. And just people this is before the internet, or was it 89? Yeah, so it was before the internet, but this was sort of playground talk, or everybody just saying like, Michael Keaton, really? And then news articles just kind of announcing it. And then when it came out, though, I mean, that movie had so much, such a big advertising push that everybody saw it.
Yeah.
And then
Well, it's also Batman.
yeah, it was Batman. Like, Batman is back, and this is no longer campy Adam West Batman. So I think everybody saw it differently. And then I think with every Batman announcement, you're going to have some pushback. You're like, okay, George Clooney, I guess he's got like the jaw, and then Val Kilmer and everything else. But it just, I remember Ben Affleck. They're like, oh, it's going to be like Daredevil, or
Well, that was the difference between Ben Affleck's announcement and Michael Keaton's announcement. With Michael Keaton, it was very clearly, I can't imagine this. And with Ben Affleck, it was, I can imagine this, and I don't want it.
Right.
Right. Like, I've seen this before,
Right.
and I don't want it. And it turns out we did want it. He took the role seriously. He played the older Batman, bitter old Batman,
Grizzled Batman.
grizzled Batman. He did his CrossFit on camera, and we ate it up. So if he's out of the Batman role, I think Warner Brothers is screwed. Like, there's no way they can start a new Batman franchise with the Batman and have this Justice League going on, but have to have it recast. They would have to write Batman, Bruce Wayne, out of the Batman movies.
Yeah. they would just have the Batman kind of. I have no idea what that. I mean, are there any? I guess what comic storylines could they pull on to sort of
They would
cover that up?
I think they would have to rewrite the Batman, which the rumors is as Matt Reeves comes into the director's role, he may start with a new script. And previously it was Ben Affleck collaborating with Jeff Johns over at DC to work on the script. I think they would have Warner Brothers would encourage them to write it in a way so that Batman could retire and kind of be like what the Dark Knight trilogy ended at, where it was going to be Robin, Joseph Gordon-Levitt taking over the role of the Batman,
Right.
and introducing maybe a Robin type character or a Nightwing type character, and have the mantle passed on for the next Justice League film, and then bring back someone who could play, and have that be a problem for a future date.
Right. Well, I think this is one of those questions where if this is already an issue, should they just sort of cut their losses and try to recast or something? I mean, you have Justice League that's filmed.
I don't think they could recast at this point. But
No.
the good thing for them is they already established the stage as this is grizzled Batman.
All right.
Doing it for 10 years. They're doing it for 20 years, however long.
Right.
And they already, in Batman v Superman, they had the Robin costume with the Joker. So they could bring in an actor to say that was, someone who's younger and say that was the Robin of that story and comes back and do Red Hood. And then make Red Hood be the villain of the Batman film and take over the mantle of the Batman and kind of combine that with Nightfall.
Yeah. Well, I guess we'll see how this affects that script then. It's going to be a pretty dramatic change regardless.
Yeah. Lots of interesting things happening. Staying more with DC, because I know we talk about Marvel a lot. The new rumor, according to Hollywood Reporter,
I hate this rumor.
I know, is that Warner Brothers for Suicide Squad 2, not David Ayer, Mel Gibson, potentially.
Jeez.
Really?
That infuriates me. How success can really make us forget the reason we stopped paying attention to Mel Gibson. Right.
And it's because the David Ayers, who did Suicide Squad, is focusing on his film Gotham City Sirens, which is Harley Quinn, clearly the standout role character in Suicide Squad. So to focus on Harley Quinn, and he can then bring in Joker, but Harley Quinn, Poison Ivy, Catwoman, the female villains of the DC universe. And then Suicide Squad 2, I guess you still have, it's Will Smith's movie, it's Deadshot's movie, I guess, with some of the characters, Captain Flag, Rick Flag. The best line of this Hollywood Reporter article is, sources say that Gibson is familiarizing himself with the material.
Oh, man.
Just that one line tells you everything you need to know why this is not a good idea.
Right.
When you have to have someone who comes in with baggage and then also doesn't love the material, has no history with the material, you're really just shooing someone in to bring a name into it, because you don't have big names to anchor the cast. You have to have a big name to anchor the director. Would he put himself in it? Like, what's the deal?
I have no idea. I mean, this scene, like Suicide Squad, was not good either. So I'm kind of wondering, how they're going to promote this movie, because they had so many missteps with the first one. I mean, they're trying to save it. But now if they're thinking, oh, we'll bring in sort of a quote unquote marquee director for this, maybe it'll turn it around and see what his take looks like. I mean, I'm not excited about watching this, and especially if Mel Gibson is helming it.
Yeah. The last thing I did, I had a pretty packed weekend. I think I mentioned it on This Only a Test a couple weeks ago, maybe a couple months ago, but I finally, Danica and I went to the Speakeasy. Have you heard of this?
Is this the phone booth you have to go through to?
It's not a phone booth.
Okay.
And it's not a bar. What is a bar? It's
sorry.
theatrical experience.
That's right.
So New York has this theater show called, I want to say it's called Speak No More.
Okay. You had to be in costume for this, right? Or rather, it was highly encouraged you dressed, period?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Sleep No More, sorry. Sleep No More is a theater production in New York. They've been doing it for a while. It's set in this hotel, and it's like an immersive theater experience where attendees walk around at their own pace in theatrically designed rooms, and then a story unfolds. And the San Francisco version is called The Speakeasy, and it was a theatrical production put on in 2014. They rented a space, decked it out. They lost their venue, and so last year, the writers and the creators of the show found a new space in an undisclosed location, 9,000 square feet, which is not small.
No.
And they spent, I think, close to $4 million renovating it to look like a 1920s speakeasy in San Francisco.
Okay.
Underground. So they built out a full cabaret. There's a casino. There's a bar. There are 9 different rooms total, I believe. And we're fascinated, one, because of this immersive theatrical experience. So the idea is you book a time. You go. They have performances throughout the week. They don't tell you where it is. You are encouraged to dress up. So formal wear is required.
Okay.
So it's either cocktail attire or 1920s thematic wear. So you have to dress up. They give you an address. You go to an alleyway.
You couldn't go in like a Starfleet uniform and be like that episode.
I know. You couldn't go in and
the
holodeck
Royale
on.
or whatever it is.
Yeah. Computer.
Right.
Arch. Right. You can computer arch.
No.
No.
Okay.
Even though it really, because those Star Trek episodes, like when I talked about it, I put it was akin to Westworld.
Right.
But it's actually, you're right. It's more akin to Star Trek especially because of the theming. The rooms, weren't Westworld style massive environments. It was like one room.
Okay.
Like that's the Next Generation, whenever they would go and it would be one room, right? One casino room. Like that episode, do you remember? It was
well, it's when they were trapped in the space hotel.
Yes, the space hotel.
Yeah.
It's exactly like that. Yeah.
The astronauts like were trapped in this terrible universe,
and that kept cycling itself.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly like that.
Right.
Oh my God, how did you mention it?
Were you able to mic the dice so you can be the rich investors to buy the hotel and get outside? Well, so is it? So you talk about like it's Westworld. The people act as effective with like NPCs, and are they like trying to entice you into quests or
no? So there's not a ton of interactivity.
Okay.
There are 30 performers, 30 actors, and the whole thing runs like 3.5 hours to 4 hours long.
Okay.
So it's not a short experience, which is really impressive. But the reason they are like NPCs is every performer has a 3.5 hour script from dialogue to where they are to staging to blocking.
Do you think it doesn't branch?
It doesn't branch.
Okay.
It's one continuous loop. The only minor branching that there is if you're sitting in a seat that they're supposed to be sitting in, then they'll engage you to tell you to, good sir, is someone sitting here? Can I have the seat? This is my seat. And then you have that light interaction. So the night that we went, it was pretty packed, which is good because there's like a right balance between like you wanted to feel like there are a lot of people there inhabiting and populating the world.
Right.
But you don't want it to be too much because everyone is an observer. So everyone is kind of in there, like it's not like everyone's 1920s.
Right.
They're all modern people. Only 30 of the people are in their 1920s, but everyone's dressed up like you're encouraged to kind of role play along a little bit.
Well, so there's 30 actors. How many participants are there, or like I guess attendees?
I couldn't count, but it's got to be several hundred.
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Okay. I was thinking you were going to say like 50.
No, it's definitely more than that because even like the cabaret is 50 people, and that's just one of the rooms. But the cool thing is you can sit. Like you can follow along the stories because there are between 30 actors, there are a dozen or storylines at least. And we found a person we were interested in and we followed them, and then they branched off and they would go sometimes they would go behind locked door, like private doors. So you couldn't follow them. But for the most part, they would have a path that they would walk in and they would encounter people at scripted times, at scripted moments. There was one room that was kind of the secret room that wasn't in part of the world. So there's a cabaret, there are dancers or performers, ventriloquists, comedians, and then they all go to a dressing room. And you can see the dressing room, you walk down a hallway, you see the dressing room open, but you can't really hear what's going on inside. But there is a secret room on the other side of the mirror. It's a one-way mirror. And it's not themed in any way. It's kind of like, this is your voyeuristic room. And so you and like 20 people can sit there and watch all the drama play out. So there's a lot of behind the scenes. It's all scripted, but you learn a lot of backstory from the dressing room.
So are these actors basically like Pied Pipers walking through? You have a bunch of people following their story, or did people kind of, there's too many people following that person?
Yeah,
I'm gonna
I think it
drop off?
naturally balanced itself out. It wasn't as awkward as like if someone was, sitting and chatting, you'd be like hovering over their shoulder and listening in. You did at times feel like people would give them space. Like if there was a big dramatic moment happening between two actors, a big climactic moment, like you could definitely see a ring of people forming around. It wasn't like I was sitting on the couch and just glancing over and trying to overhear. It was still theater.
Right.
And they would do things, I thought was very clever with the lighting. It was all custom lighting in the room. So, there was a waiting room with a couple couches and bathroom doors. And, when a big moment was supposed to happen, the light would dim and they would spotlight the two actors and for like a flashback or something or a soliloquy. So it was still theatrical.
Would everybody stop? Like everybody else?
Yes,
Okay, so it's kind of like the pause. Everybody pay attention, and then
exactly.
Okay.
So they would highlight it with musical cues, with lighting, with the other actors slowing their motions. It didn't all play out exactly in real time, but boy, it's been in my head this entire week. I've been thinking about it, and really wanted to go back. At the end of the evening, walking back out into North Beach in San Francisco where it's set.
And well, you just gave away.
Well, there's a specific location.
Right.
Yeah, it's in North Beach.
Right.
But walking out, it really felt like jumping out of a time portal and like hearing like police sirens and hearing cars. We went during like the night of Chinese New Year.
Oh, wow.
Parade.
Yeah,
the parade and firecrackers going off, and it really felt like one of those 80s movies where it got time warped from the past and jumped back into the present. Yeah. It was a really, really great experience.
Was there any interactivity? You said like you could sit in chairs, and I guess I don't know if there was like a bar or gambling or something. But
there's gambling, and they give you can buy fake chips ahead of time, and then you get chips to play in just fake roulette or blackjack, and some of the characters, even the dealers, have stories that like everyone has a role in it. So the casino is there for some of the side characters walk up and like lose all their money and or like to get into trouble. Right. And the bar, there's a piano in the bar, so there are performers in the bar as well. But there are people like sitting at the bar who are definitely characters. I think they did a good job of seeding some characters who you didn't realize were characters till later on. Okay, like they'd be walking around and then suddenly they'd have a speaking role.
So did you also run into anybody who had been there multiple times and they were following new people, or?
We didn't really chat with other people who were there.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's for the best.
Right.
Because you kind of are in your own bubble of feeling like you are transported in time. You're doing your own like mental role playing, like whether it's the holodeck or the Westworld style experience. It was just fun to, talk about it afterward, but not while the thing was happening. So while I think they encourage groups, it wouldn't be a great thing to do with like 10 people, maybe 2 groups, like 4 people, and split off in pairs and then come back at the end. And you can honestly, you can sit at the bar for 3.5 hours and get real drinks because it's a real bar, and you would get pieces of a story and probably a pretty satisfying story. But feel like for 3.5 hours you were in 1923.
Wow.
In a bar in San Francisco, and crazy stuff was happening.
I want to know who the Man in Black patron is of Speakeasy. Someone who's been there like 30, 40 times or something, and is just, they recognize that person as like the guy who's trying to get the deep story, but who knows?
Might be a little weird for the actors.
Oh,
too.
yeah, it'd be very weird for them. It's like, this guy's back.
Yeah, because you can buy season passes, or like we'll do like 10 packs or something.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a little too rich for my blood. All right, that's plenty of pop culture. We're going to talk a little bit about technology, and for that, our technology bumper. If I can get it to play. That's not the right one at all. All right.
What sound is that?
That's not it at all.
Nope.
Technology news. Steve, do you have a NES Mini yet?
I do.
You got one?
Yeah. I tend to be pretty fast on that stuff, especially being a Nintendo nerd. So yeah, I've had one for a while. I turned it on. Some of the sound emulation was off, and I already own all those games anyway. So it was more like, this is a cool thing to sit on my desk.
Oh, so that's a good question. Have you done like comparison? Like could you detect what things were emulated, gameplay wise, audio wise, graphics wise, and what things weren't?
Well, they're all emulated. I mean, so
Anything that's noticeable?
yeah. The sound is the most noticeable thing. Just I forget which one was kind of just jumped out at me, but it's like, wow, that sounds wrong. And then sort of going to the cartridge and actually comparing it. I mean, it's good. Like unless you had kind of gone to the level of the super collector or something, you're probably not going to care. In fact, I would say like the vast majority of people don't care. They can play the games and it feels authentic. The controller's great. So, but for me, it's like, I got it just because I think it looked cool, not necessarily because I would use it to play things on.
Well, people have been tinkering, of course, with the NES Mini, and they've already been able to add more ROMs to it. And now there's an emulator, RetroArch, that people have ported now that can run more than just NES games. You can get SNES games, Genesis, and Game Boy.
Neo Geo as well, I think.
And Neo Geo, yeah. So I don't know about performance. I don't know how that runs on the NES Mini software or hardware.
Well, that hardware is like when it first got revealed was way more powerful than you need for the NES. And then when you look at like even the Pi Score, right? That Raspberry Pi 3. It's got plenty of horsepower. I think they posted some videos of it running, and it was going pretty steady, 60 frames a second. There were some like hiccups here and there, but it looked pretty good. And I think it's sort of based off the hack cheese stuff they had, where you could load up tons and tons of ROMs onto the system. But the system only has 512 megabytes of storage.
So not a ton of ROMs you can put.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you're going, well, nothing super huge. You can probably fit most libraries like one at a time. But you couldn't have like all Super Nintendo, all Genesis, all Neo Geo, everything else at the same time.
That's greedy. Just when you're saying, okay, if you can fit an entire library,
right?
That's a lot. That's
I mean,
plenty.
that's what
it's
people
more than the 10 that you want. I know people are completists and like, oh, I don't think that's a real. I mean, that MAME cabinet doesn't have every single game ever made and every variant. Right. Not good enough.
Well, I tell people, when they're building MAME cabinets, if you're going to do one, don't put every ROM on there. Just keep it relatively short, or sort of a curated experience.
Yes, absolutely.
Rather than like, hey, let's play this like awful Kicks porn clone or something like that.
Menu Hero.
Yeah.
Right? It's every time you just ended up just going up like 40 versions of Street Fighter before you get to the next S game.
Well, that was actually the problem with the original NES Classic hack, was if you put on too many, it was impossible to scroll through everything. So then they started doing like folders and categorization, which made it a lot faster. But yeah, it's a cool hack, definitely.
Yeah, I wonder if someone has taken on the challenge of playing 10 minutes of every, or enough of every game, one a day on a complete library, and just blogging about it or making a video about it.
Well, I mean, I've played every game for the NES and Super Nintendo because I own them all.
You've actually gone through every variant of every game?
I've played every game that I own, to varying lengths. And of course, I worked in a game store when I was in high school, so I've had tons of time back then.
All right, so you added this next piece of news to the show notes. Tell me about, what is the Analog Mini NT? Yeah, this is way more exciting, I think, than the NES Classic. So Analog Mini, or NT Mini, is that $450 NES that has high def out. This is the second version, not the first one. Oops, sorry about that. The second one that came out, and this one runs off an FPGA. So the first one used original NES parts. This one has the programmable core, so it's emulating the NES. FPGA is custom computing hardware.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Which is incredibly expensive to develop.
Right.
Yeah, you're not buying off the shelf and adding layers of abstraction for software.
Right. So basically, what you're doing is it's emulating the hardware of the NES, rather than software. So what's cool about it is it was actually partially designed by a guy named Kevtris, who's well known in the emulation scene for developing cores, emulation cores, and there's official firmware for the Analog NT Mini, and then he started releasing his own firmware where you can start running Sega Master System games and ColecoVision and SG-1000 off the SD port that's on the back.
So he made the hardware and then also release
his own firmware.
Yes. But why wouldn't that firmware just be part of the hardware release?
Because that's quite tricky. Analog is saying, hey, this is a way to play your high definition NES cartridges that you own. Right, because there's the Famicom and NES cartridge slot on there. If they were to say, oh, you can just start dumping ROMs on an SD card and play everything you want, then it gets a lot more tricky for them legally. So Kevtris, his day job is working on like medical equipment. So attention to detail is just staggering because people could die if he messed up. And
Right.
so he has been doing these cores, and he does them for everything pretty much, including real obscure like Watara Supervision and Game Mates and things like that. And he's said he's going to keep releasing these firmware updates. And the first one, Sega Master System, like I said, Coleco SG-1000.
And this is
Thank you, boy.
original NES controller ports. You can use your old NES controllers and plug them in.
Correct. Right.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's expensive, and it's actually sold out now because once people started hearing about the things that you could do with it, they got more interested. It'll be interesting to see because Kevtris has long talked about releasing his own system. This is maybe an interesting way of him to kind of backing into it in many ways, and we'll see what he's able to add in terms of hardware support. So obviously with the cartridge port being only NES and Famicom, you load up the ROMs on the SD card. So a menu pops up and you just pick the ROM just like any other emulator, except because he's programming the FPGA, it is probably the most accurate emulation you're going to be able to get.
And there's no plans, as he said, is there going to be a hardware version for SNES?
Well, so that's kind of up to Analog NT or Analog Interactive. But right now, I think he said, I'm just going to keep releasing these cores and you'll be able to play with it. And, those that are in the know are really enjoying the stuff that he's putting out. So it's super cool. It's also $450. So, it's
$450 for on its surface if you're not going to dive into it. And just the perfect way to play your old NES cartridges with your old NES controllers.
On an HDMI TV, yeah.
And so the output is really the big thing. This 1080 output, how does that compare to the output that you'd put on one of those adapters that can upconvert and add interlacing and...
like something like the FrameMeister, you'll be able to output, but if you have RGB out of a NES, so doing the RGB mod into a FrameMeister out to the TV.
And the FrameMeister is a piece of hardware.
Right, sorry.
It's a converter box.
Upscaler.
Upscaler that you can plug S-Video, or not S-Video, composite.
Yeah, composite, component, and RGB.
And RGB.
Right.
And then it outputs HDMI.
Correct.
And lets you tweak some of the
right.
The
you can do things
like
like add scan lines and there's color profiles and all kinds of other stuff. It's a really cool device. That's also $400 or $350. So yeah, if you had an RGB modded NES, which is $150 plus the FrameMeister, it'd be pretty equivalent to what you get with the Analog NT. And so it's cheaper in that respect. But of course, the FrameMeister is much more versatile in terms of other systems.
Any other vintage system. That boggles my mind that there's in an industry and amazing engineers, people who design FPGAs and hardware for medical equipment that devote their brain space, their time, and their energy for overcoming a problem that a company like Nintendo didn't even consider it being a problem, and most people don't think of as a problem, to play vintage games, to play old hardware games today.
It's people send him like these really obscure systems, and then he posts videos where it's like, okay, I got this working after like about 4 or 5 hours. Like, oh my, having that brain power on the, emulating a system that probably thousands of people might have owned is quite fascinating. And I love it. This is all about preservation.
And it's an art that's going away because that concept of preservation isn't really necessary, because the way software is run today, the way hardware is designed, the way standards are built, everything's built to be future-proof. And software built, I guess the dedicated hardware of today, and we talked about this with the PS4 being locked down, software locked down on the hardware. There's still, you still have to go through a layer of emulation. You can't just throw it on faster CPUs.
Right.
That's going to have to be adapted for. But everything's developed on the same systems and the same shared, in many cases, same engines. Yeah, so going forward, that's just not going to be needed, and that whole art of reviving old games won't be around.
Yeah. Well, one quick emulation thing that I didn't put on here, Primal Rage 2, which is an unreleased Atari arcade game, is now finally playable thanks to a guy, I cannot remember his name, but I will put it on the show notes. He has been working for over 3 years to get everything properly decrypted and supported in MAME in order to play a game that never came out. So congratulations to him, and that's really cool.
When that happens in the classic arcade fan community, how big of an event is that, and how does word get out? Is it just from forums to and?
I mean, the funny thing is, Primal Rage 2 has been playable. The actual physical cabinet has shown up at California Extreme, and I believe there's also a copy in Chicago. So if you lived in one of those areas, you could have played it. But this is one of those anybody, anywhere can load it up in this custom version of MAME. It starts usually from an announce, and it's picked up by people who have been following that person doing the project, and then it just sort of spreads like wildfire from there. And like, hey, look at this! Like, congratulations to him. I mean, I can't imagine like 3 years off and on trying to get a game that never came out working.
Are there many more holy grails of that for classic arcade games?
Yeah, there's a bunch of undumped. There's a list of basically undumped ROMs or things we know exist that haven't been dumped yet. I think probably the most prominent is Marble Madness 2, Marble Man, where the person holding the ROMs is unwilling to release a dump. He has dumped them, but it's one of those cases where that person paid a lot of money for that game, and it's his prerogative to do what he wants with that board.
Yeah, I can't hold on to it forever.
No, you can't take it with you.
Yeah. Analog NT Mini, $450. I can't justify it. Does it have an Ethernet port?
It does not have an Ethernet port.
No Ethernet port. Well, what might have Ethernet support, if not a port itself, is Nintendo Switch.
Yeah.
This came out of nowhere.
Well, I mean, you saw in the reveal they had the giant stadium of people playing Splatoon, and they wanted maybe
esports, right?
Yeah, esports, right? So like low latency connections. That's been a thing in the GameCube world for a long time, where you can link Mario Kart and all those other systems. So
we are 2 weeks away now.
Gosh, that's right.
I know, 2 weeks away. It's going to be a busy GDC week in 2 weeks.
Yes.
2 weeks away from Nintendo Switch launch, which launching the week of GDC, a little crazy, right?
It is the Friday, though.
It is. That's right. So actually, that's going to, I mean.
Won't be worn out.
Right, won't be worn out from GDC, and you're going to lose the ability to, I guess there's no Street Pass. But
right.
But to network with people, literally network with people, because there's a USB port on Nintendo Switch. It's how it charges. You can get an adapter.
But it's USB-C.
USB-C.
Right.
Absolutely. Right. So this adapter, that's an official adapter release in partnership with Nintendo, is for USB to Ethernet, which you also had for the Wii.
Right.
If you didn't want to use the Wi-Fi. So I guess, is there a USB-A port on the Switch?
It's not on the tablet part itself. I think it's on the dock. I actually, to be honest, I haven't looked too closely at the pictures of the dock, but I'm guessing, there's got to be a USB port back there. So otherwise, this peripheral has nothing to plug into.
Exactly, and this is officially supported and licensed. Right. So the $30 peripheral and you can theoretically buy any USB to Ethernet adapter that works. Plugs into we think the dock of Nintendo Switch, and it allows up to 8 people or 10 people. Is that 10? I want to say, is it 10? Yeah, 10 dock systems can play, and you don't need to sign in or connect to internet to authenticate your user, as long as you have the cartridge.
Yeah, that's great.
You can play. Splatoon is the only game looks like supported, but
Mario Kart will have to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was the thing. You could each get your own TV screen, right, with the networked Mario Kart. So
yeah, I wonder if it's going to allow people
put cardboard on the TV. Did you ever do that with like GoldenEye?
I did. I've seen photos.
Or Halo, where you have pieces of cardboard.
Where you split off the. Yeah. I mean, Mario Kart really doesn't. I guess if you're playing against someone,
you see what power up they have.
You see, that's the thing.
Or where they are.
And with battle mode,
right? Battle mode coming back. Yeah, you can't do that split screen. Come on.
So you're going to need your own Switch.
Right.
I was hoping for 2 people to play. Well, with Double Dash, it was team.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's going to be. I mean, it's going to offer future opportunities.
Right.
I'd love for there to be team, if they're going to promote esports, team esports, 2-player, some type of racing game, some type of Mario game, where you have like 8 people playing in teams of 2 would be awesome.
Yeah. I mean, this is like only going to apply to a very small number of people, but the people that it does apply to is really exciting news. So good for them.
little bit more moving on to Sony and PlayStation.
It's all games. Sorry, that's all me.
Games and console news
Right.
out. New update to PlayStation Now.
Yeah.
So PlayStation Now is going away on some older devices.
Yeah, they've been kind of telegraphing this a little bit by not talking about it. But for those of you who don't know, PlayStation Now is where you can stream games to different systems and like Blu-ray players and TVs. I think it's what the Gaikai technology was, right?
So they bought Gaikai,
Yeah.
and this was like on live, where the game is actually being rendered offsite.
Mhm.
And as long as, like back when they announced it, internet infrastructure was good but not great. Now it's a little better, still not great. But they would compress the image and promise a little latency, and you could rent games or
Right.
pay for a subscription to play like a buffet of games.
It was expensive. It was like, well, it still is expensive. I think it's like $20 a month or something. But yeah, what they said with the new service update is they're actually removing a bunch of supported systems, including the PlayStation 3, which is kind of crazy. I mean, you would figure that that's got that installed base, but you know, it is what it is. But also, you know, the Vita, which not a surprise. Some of their TVs that had this and Blu-ray players, and they said they're going to focus on PS4 and Windows PCs.
So this
moving
is
forward.
This is strange to me because there's no difference in performance for a game because it's just video and
Yeah,
input. So if they're getting rid of PlayStation Now completely because it wasn't doing well, I get them just phasing it out completely. But if
Right.
they're still supporting it on PS4, then what's the difference of just spinning up more servers to run the games for the other devices?
This might be something related to the way the system is architected. I mean, this is kind of like why you couldn't change your PlayStation name forever, is because maybe the way it was designed and what was used as a key or whatever made it very difficult for them to be able to support multiple things. So maybe there is some kind of infrastructure thing, or because in the announcement they said they want to focus the experience on PlayStation 4 and Windows PCs, which leads me to believe if they wanted to continue supporting PS3, then they would have had to make some kind of compromise. That, or the other thought is maybe it's headcount, right? Where they don't have enough people to support those other platforms. So it's like, okay, who's going to do the PS3 client or the Vita client? It's like, we don't have enough people to do that, so let's just punt it.
And I've always been interested in how those things are run in the back end for a service like OnLive, because that was only for PC games, which
Right.
can then run on their console and on other consoles. The developer would have to add a layer of programming on top to make it work with interfaces when you can't access things like the menu,
Right.
and have time limits for gameplay. But for consoles, is it running on developer hardware? Like what are the actual systems?
Yeah.
It's not a warehouse full of PS3s and PS4s running that's streaming video. It's running on server hardware. So is it emulated?
Probably
Is it,
development hardware, right? Yeah, some sort of like headless system, right? That just kind of bare minimum what you need to run it. But who knows? I don't think they've ever talked about exactly what the architecture looks like behind it, and it's something that we'll try to dive into as part of documenting history.
all right, from games to phones. And sorry, Jeremy isn't here to talk about some Apple news. But when is it too early? Is it ever not too early to talk about rumors for the fall iPhone?
Oh, geez.
Yeah.
No,
What-
it's not. I mean, people were talking about the 8 before the 7 even came out. So
That's right. So the latest rumor for the 8 is that wireless charging will be the big flagship feature across maybe all of the tiers of the iPhone 8. They're not going to segment it between the cheap version and the super expensive, the expensive version and the more expensive version. And part of what's fueling that rumor is Apple joining the Wireless Power Consortium. So this is kind of like Apple adopting USB. It's a common standard, the Qi standard, and there's one of over 200 members of the consortium working to develop wireless charging. And regardless of whether their devices, phones, tablets, laptops get wireless charging in the future, it's good that they're not developing their own standard, and
Right.
their devices can potentially work with other standards.
yeah, well, there was rumors they were waiting for some sort of like wide field. I think we even talked about this on the podcast I was in, where you don't really need to be like inductive charging, where you don't need to be right on it. It just sort of charges from the air. My theory is this is getting them closer to the iPhone with no port on it, right? They already kind of got rid of the headphone jack, and now it's like, can we get rid of Lightning to where you can just sort of set it? The other concern is maybe it's like a battery life issue, right? Where, all right, these charging pads are in Starbucks and everything else, and maybe the new phone has to make some kind of compromise on battery life, and we need to find a way to get people to charge it more easily. I don't know. I'm just throwing out random ideas.
It's a large investment. I think the biggest thing is the infrastructure for the charging. One, the standards. Absolutely. If the standards start changing quickly and the research starts changing quickly, then the power mats of today are going to be outdated by tomorrow when a new type of wireless charging technology comes out. It's almost the same problem that on a different scale, different cost scale, that Tesla has with and other EV manufacturers have with cars.
Right.
And I absolutely see the benefit of wireless charging if there is the infrastructure in place. The power mats being in Starbucks is okay because they made it work by giving you those adapter rings, right? So you don't have to put your phone in a case to charge it. You plug into an adapter as a ring, and basically you can have it there. It keeps you in the Starbucks, keeps you buying coffee, and you can charge. Yeah, that kind of works. You're still working with an adapter. They built it into the table. So that's the infrastructure investment, right? It's not a mat that you put like a cutting mat on top of a table.
Right.
It was flush with the table. How is Apple going to get, unless they're making a car? If they make a car,
and
that makes
like
total
the way
sense.
to set it on.
Like
on
every surface on the dashboard is a charging surface or something, right? Or within the field of the car, or where you normally put your cup holders.
Right.
That's a charging surface. That makes sense. But where are the places Apple can get you to put your phone outside of you having to buy a separate charging mat, charging platform, accessory that still has to be plugged into the wall?
Right.
They're not selling coffee tables. They're not selling side tables. Like, what are they, like, it's still going to be
this is how
another
rumors
accessory.
get started, right? It's like the Apple furniture line or something like that.
Johnny Ive he hates designing phones. He hates it so much.
He wants to move
He hates
to
designing
something
apps.
else.
He wants to design furniture. He wants to design cars. And maybe this is the chance. For him to do that.
I think maybe part of this is like hedging your bets, right? It's like, okay, if this like other wireless charging solution we're looking at is maybe taking too long and we need to have another box to check for the next launch, like let's add it in there and then see where it goes. But I mean, it looks like my thought is like they're just trying to kill the port, and it won't happen maybe this cycle, but maybe in a couple, who knows?
I absolutely believe, I'm with you there, that that's something that they want to kill the port for every device,
right?
For laptops, for their phones, and for their tablets. And maybe it's going to require them selling some type of mat that you put your laptop on and your phone on and your tablet on that can be in different sizes. That's a really bad design decision. That's why I'm not designing this thing. But the Apple side table, let's start the rumor here. That's not, I can imagine the $10,000 Apple side table being a real thing designed by Johnny Ive.
Right.
Like, they're all about the high end.
Yeah.
It's all about those rich people who want the Black Mirror house.
Right.
But one place that would definitely have an Apple side table and wireless charging table would be the Apple Cafe. Now, what is the Apple Cafe, you ask? It's not a real thing right now, but it could have very well have been a real thing. Fast Company Design has a story about the concept that back in 1996,
Right.
before the return of Steve Jobs,
He was still part-time, right? This was like the next thing was
he
going
was still
on?
next. Yeah. He wasn't even I don't think he was interim CEO even then.
All right.
Apple was contemplating some type of retail presence. Of course, they have the retail presence. The hugely successful Apple stores are a big thing in the world. But an Apple Cafe, where they hired Imagineer, a Tony Christopher, Landmark Entertainment Group. Landmark, of course, makes theater chains, and a lot of rides, theme park rides. But they shared some concept art for what looks very much like a 1990s theme park, like Apple Land at Universal Studios.
I looked at it and thought this is the Cafe 80s from Back to the Future, like maybe aged up just a little bit. And it just, there's so
like
many 90s.
internet.
Yeah, at your table.
At your lunch table.
Right. And then like the graphics is sort of like that CorelDRAW clip art selection, and just like text that's kind of like bent along with whatever banner it's on, and it's pretty funny looking. But
I kind of really wish they did this, even if it was a failure. Just to have it as the relic of in computing history.
It would probably look dated as they were building it. I think just given 96, 97, like all the things that were changing. What this reminded me of was a couple of years later, Nolan Bushnell, who founded Atari,
And
created
Chuck E. Cheese.
created a U-Wink. And there was one in Mountain View, and U-Wink was kind of like this, it was games where you play, at the table, but you ordered all your food via this touch screen as well. And the food was terrible and the games were bad. So, Chuck E. Cheese at least had good games. So, but that failed pretty quickly. It's kind of like an upscaled like Dave and Buster's, but you didn't talk to anybody, right? You just did everything through this tablet. So I think that's what I thought of when I looked at this. But yeah, when you see the images, you're just like, wow, this is like a 90s time capsule. And it would have been one of those funny things that like they would have to freeze it like that and never make any updates.
Yep.
Because then it would like go through cycles of like, haha, that place is so ghetto. And then it would like coming back.
That
it's
place
like,
is the cool place
yeah,
to hang
that
out
is the
now.
cool place. It's like like the Futurama. It's like, did you say rings are cool? And so it's like, no, rings are lame. So,
well, speaking of projects that Apple is diving itself into that maybe successes or failures, they've announced for a while that content is something that they've been interested in. And I guess they do produce content. If you think about Apple, their streaming radio station,
Right.
Apple One, which they hire DJs and they make content, but video content, they have a new show. It's a reality show called Planet of the Apps. And the first trailer just came out. It was Eddie Q in partnership with Will.i.am, and it's a competition show.
yeah, like Gwyneth Paltrow's on it. And who else? Someone else.
I don't know
Yeah.
half of these people.
Okay.
It looks terrible.
It looks terrible. I think the thing that went in my mind, especially as someone who was an app developer, like the biggest problem people have right now is discovery, right? It's like, how do people know that my app exists? If this gets any remote amount of traction, I mean, it's good for them because people will be aware of this thing in the App Store, even if they don't win, right? You'll have that feature.
But it's taking that Shark Tank,
Yeah.
The Voice competition, like I am the
pitch
authority.
is hilarious. Did
Like,
you see that?
The way they pitch the apps.
Yeah, they actually have to stand. It's like a literal escalator pitch where the escalator is going down and they start at the top. And then as they're coming down the escalator, that's the amount of time they have for their pitch. So,
Oh my God. Well,
yeah. Actually, when I first saw this, I thought it was going to sort of happen over the course of the season. It sounds like they've already filmed it. But I was like, copycats are going to be like, they're going to hear the pitch and someone's going to load up their computer and put
that's
it,
the big problem with
put out a
discovery is
copycat.
copycats.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
it's-
Like, yeah, you might have a great idea. Gwyneth Paltrow might tell you have a great app idea.
Right.
But guess what? 50 in the time that episode aired, free show, 50, apps have come out to
Right.
duplicate this functionalities.
Exactly.
And it really, I don't think there's so many bad reasons that this show shouldn't exist. Like,
Right.
what is the point? Is it supposed to glamorize the Apple App Store, make app developers celebrities, show how much work goes into making an app? What is the point of the show? What is the utility other than, like you said, discovery
Right.
for new ideas? But we're at a point where the App Store is mature. If this show came out 5 years ago, when new hardware was coming out, like, are they going to pair it where season 2 is going to be like Apple's new form factor, and you got to make a new iPad Pro 2 app, like as a way to show off hardware? Like,
I think there's a morbid curiosity, like living in the Bay Area and being surrounded by technology. We understand kind of the app ecosystem and everything else. I think there's a wide audience that just sees like someone made an app and they became a billionaire. Like, I think I could do that. And so they see this like elevator pitch where it's got like, I think we should deliver quarters for people to do laundry over the internet or this app. And they're like, I could have done that. So, there's probably some of that. There's like, they have these like outtakes of the, whatever consultant or expert telling them, you got to think about marketing and user acquisition and all this other stuff. So it's maybe giving sort of a peek into what is the like a very like stylized peek into what it's like to be an app developer. The other funny thing is the grand prize is a $10 million investment from Lightspeed Ventures, who famously invested in Snapchat early on. So that's probably their biggest win. They're normally like enterprise. But I want to see that term sheet. That's got to be the worst term sheet ever.
Well, it's just like Shark Tank. Like
Right.
anything that they offer, if you know anything, if you're any type of startup, there's no reason to take any of those offers.
like,
if you have any good idea, you only take it because you know you don't have a great idea and you want the easy money now.
Right. And then you wonder, it's like, why would Lightspeed invest $10 million? It's like, well, they might have more people coming to them with ideas. If, $10 million, they maybe think like the show is basically the user acquisition budget, right? It's like you would have spent this on trying to market this app or, whatever. And, that's just kind of, or it's all just,
honestly,
why not throw it at them? They're going to be billionaires anyway. Snap's going public soon.
Yeah. The best thing they could do for a real app developer, it's really this kind of garage app developer, college student, young person making an app, like placement in the App Store is the best thing Apple can provide. In the carousel for a week to tie into the show or something.
Right.
Like that's invaluable. And that actually gets people using it and testing it rather than just investment, which sounds great. That's a very Silicon Valley type of thing to propose. It feels like a joke out of the show, Silicon Valley, like more than the legit thing.
I mean, you think of it, right? Like because like reality shows, right? There's a parts that's like, quote unquote scripted and like how you edit things, right? So I wonder how much of that is going to come into play.
The producers,
and see like what happens in the production. It's like, hey, when you're looking at this camera, can you do this, or like splicing together interviews or whatever they do? So
confessionals, app developer confessionals. Let's go to Medium.
Maybe that's the
those.
app, like a confessional app. Why don't we? You want to get on the escalator?
No, I don't want to get. No. I'm hopping off the escalator. Right. I think the bigger story is Apple making content,
right?
And Apple TV, no surprise. I think it's still a hobby for Apple. Yeah, they have the new Apple TV. I think the remote's terrible. We talked last week about getting a new leader running that department who used to work at Amazon Fire. But the thing that would have made Apple TV the iPod level and iPhone level success is if they own the content channels as well.
Right.
Because the things they couldn't do with Apple TV was broker the deals. One, maybe because it was about Steve Jobs, or maybe because people wised up to the Apple way of doing things.
Right.
That they
they see what happens in the music industry, right?
Exactly.
And so it's like, we're not going to fall into that trap.
And so the way and so Starz, HBO, Hulu, Netflix, of course, they've invested in the content. They've built these giant networks that Apple really has to cater to, and Apple can say no to Amazon, and they can say, we're not going to put Amazon Prime, Amazon now. You can't get Amazon paid produced shows on your Apple TV, but they have to have Netflix. Right. And so I think Apple's late to the game here. The thing they should have done, and there was an interesting discussion about this on Forbes, is that Apple should have really bought Netflix years ago. There was an opportunity, I think, in 2014, to buy Netflix for like $60 billion when they were valued at like $30 billion, which is an insane amount of money, right? But if they want to really own the TV market, imagine there was an opportunity back in as early as 2012 for them to buy Netflix for Beats kind of money, $5 billion. And if Apple had bought a Netflix back then for $5 billion for 5 Instagrams, right? I think Apple TV would be a much bigger deal than it is now.
Well, I think the other question, though, is would the team that Apple would have put in place if they bought it at that point be able to execute the way that Netflix has executed since then?
Well, I would argue that type of execution, heavily investing on your own content, everyone's doing it now. Hulu, Amazon, Netflix, Crackle, everyone's doing it. That's the way it would have gone through naturally.
Okay.
Netflix was the first, and I remember it being such a big deal. Orange is the New Black, House of Cards.
Like they're spending how much money, right?
How much money? It wasn't just like premium shows that competed on the network show level is competing on the HBO level. They're playing, but the HBO doing that. HBO had been doing that forever,
right?
And so I think that was the natural progression with post writer strike for the quote unquote golden age of television. That was where entertainment was moving with outside of as infrastructure, broadband infrastructure, distribution channels become more democratized. Capitalism would have done its thing.
Okay. Yeah.
But Apple missed out. I think clearly missed out on that.
I wonder how many people are going to watch this show. Like, how is it going to get promoted? How is Apple going to use its own infrastructure to promote this show? I'm sure if I have an Apple TV, it's going to be I do have an Apple TV, but it'll be like the first thing that's showing up there for a week or longer, right? But who knows?
I would, and maybe it's not too late. I would love to see Apple. Maybe they don't want to really get into the content game as seriously as HBO, but I think it'd be cool if they said, like, they clearly have the money.
Yeah, well, they have to. So the thing is, like, there's always misses, right? Whenever you're making these investments, and if they're only doing a couple, then if they have a miss, and then someone looks at a budget sheet and is like, "No, we wasted money on that." It's like, no, that's part of doing this type of business. You're going to have stuff that doesn't hit, right? Like Young Pope or whatever.
Yeah,
and so we'll see.
And tying it to hardware, like it was the great thing Netflix did, because Roku spun out of Netflix not wanting to make hardware,
right,
and not wanting to. The smart thing for Netflix as they move from mailing discs out to getting licensing deals, then to making their own content, was to make their app everywhere.
Right. Even on the Wii, right? That was like one of the big reasons people use the Wii was that Netflix disc.
So maybe the idea of Apple content locked on Apple hardware locked content, isn't that appealing? And it definitely wouldn't work for any other company. But if it were to work for one company, it would be Apple.
Right.
Because you have Apple TV. Everyone has, not everyone, but a ton of people, millions of people, hundreds of million people have Apple devices. They have content locked hardware on Apple live streams.
Oh yeah, where you have to use Safari.
You have to
watch
use
it.
Safari.
Yeah, but I mean that's us, right? I mean, yes, we want to watch the press conference. I don't think.
But I'm saying it can work, right? Like they make that type of content, and if they invested, I'm just throwing out Netflix, HBO levels of money, $500 million, $500 million to, which is again crazy amounts of money,
but not for Apple.
But not for Apple,
right?
To make Hollywood series, exclusive series. The next House of Cards, the next Man in the High Castle, the next miniseries, and took it seriously and locked it to their hardware, would that be a compelling way to get people on Apple TV over the Roku, over other boxes, and make Apple TV a real business? Right.
I mean, they want to get more people in the ecosystem, but you don't really buy a whole lot of apps on the Apple TV.
Yeah.
So I mean,
but if you bought the Apple TV and you get the hardware,
right,
or you get the content, and maybe they have to charge them the monthly subscription or something.
Who knows?
Yeah. Well, something that's coming back in the Apple ecosystem is, and also smartphones,
I never lost
data.
mine. Whatever.
I never lost mine either.
Yeah.
But
are you still on the grandfather plan?
I am on the AT&T grandfathered plan for data.
So am I.
So are you? You know what? I'm thinking of switching.
Oh man,
because it's expensive.
Okay. It has gotten more expensive.
They've raised the price recently.
Another $5. What?
Yeah, and unlimited data, of course, is never really unlimited data. Both AT&T and now Verizon, Sprint, T-Mobile have caps really at 22 gigabytes. I don't think I think Sprint is the only one who doesn't do it. But AT&T and Verizon at 22 gigabytes, they throw all your downloads. Verizon is bringing back unlimited 4G LTE data with tethering.
Right.
That may be the big differentiator. And the prices, I think, is lower than AT&T. So
like $80 or something?
$80 a month, and you get unlimited talk text, which you don't get with the grandfather AT&T plan.
Oh, so that's $80 all in. I thought that was just the data plan.
Oh, hold on.
Yeah. So
no, it includes,
Okay.
Verizon Unlimited includes text, talk, and 4G LTE data, $80 a month for single smartphone or tablet.
Okay. And that includes tethering too?
And includes 10 gigabytes of tethering.
Okay.
And so 22 gigabytes a month of unthrottled LTE,
right,
of which 10 gigabytes you can use for tethering, which AT&T still doesn't do tethering for its unlimited. That's cheaper than what I'm paying for right now.
Do you tether a lot?
I switch phone.
Yeah,
I switch it for tethering.
Right.
And I use up to 22, I use 17, 18 gigs a month.
Oh my gosh. I've never even come close to that, but of course I'm not you, so.
I find, but the thing is that if I switch to Verizon, my coverage might not be as good.
Right.
And my data, I use AT&T so much because my coverage where I live is so good that it's faster in many places. Maybe not now that I have Sonic, but faster in many places my Wi-Fi can't reach
to
use LTE over over Wi-Fi.
Well, you'll just have to invite someone over that has, one of these
Verizon.
plans and have them roam around the house. And I think I might have told this real quick random story. I was in Manhattan and I was looking at apartments. And this was like that Futurama, the suspiciously cheap apartment by the West Side
Who
Highway.
died here?
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's like, is there a body in the walls? What's happening? And then they're like, oh, no, it's, pretty good. It's like maybe 20% less than I expected. But then I looked at my phone and I had no service. And then I said to the realtor, I'm like, I don't have any service. She's like, yeah, that's a kind of a problem. They're working on that. I'm like, that's why this is cheaper. Your cell phone doesn't work in this apartment.
Well, it must be great for someone who doesn't care about cell phone
Yeah,
service.
exactly. Get a deal. Or they don't look at that's going to be a thing. Someone's going to rent it and not look at their phone. And I'm like, oh, wait, I have no cell service now.
Yeah. Something else coming back in the world of smartphones. Now, Mobile World Congress is coming up. Or not even smartphones, cell phones. Nokia 3310 may be coming back.
That ringtone, I can still hear it. I'm hearing it right now. And now I'm in. This is like Inception. I'm putting it in everybody else's head. That Nokia ringtone.
Yeah, VentureBeat is saying that HMD, which I guess HMD is the new home of Nokia.
It's like Nokia engineers, right?
It's the hardware part. Microsoft bought the software.
Right.
HMD may release a $60 phone, which is the Nokia 3310, which is it sold, I think, is maybe the third best-selling cell phone ever made.
Have they said it's the actual 3310, or is it running a different OS? I mean, I can't imagine like that's like that. What
it must be
John's
an update.
phone, right? Where it's
Yeah.
like the paper. It has to have something different, right?
Yeah.
Because that's $60.
I don't think they kept the molds or kept the
Well,
kept
I'm
the
sure
injection.
they might have them.
We got these injection molds.
Well,
We've been using. Made 200 million phones.
Thousands
not
of Chinese
more?
companies have molds for the faceplates. So
Right, yeah. Or maybe they
that's
found a
problem.
batch. They found a warehouse.
Right.
Full of phones. It's got to update the firmware.
I mean, this is emerging market, right? Like the Play.
I think it's both emerging market. Emerging market, $60 is too much. Emerging
Right,
market,
that's true.
You're talking about $10, $15 phones. This is clearly playing on nostalgia factor and also playing on durability, reliability, and durability.
Right.
This is your burger phone. This is
Right.
Did you have a 3310? You had one?
I had the
There were so many variants.
Right,
I couldn't
right,
name all of
right.
them. I had the thinner one, the 8810, I want to say. No. That was the Matrix phone.
right.
That was the
the flip bottom one.
flip bottom one.
Yeah.
Which, like, when that scene in the Matrix where Neo presses the button and it flips open.
Right.
That was the original like gadget porn of the 90s.
Right.
Like, wow, I want that cell phone.
In terms of the most notorious, right, it's the N-Gage, which I'm sure they're not bringing back. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be funny, right? If the hipster thing to do is to buy an old candy bar phone and then put on some like garish faceplate with like something on it. I don't know, like a Smash Mouth faceplate or something.
If it doesn't come with Snake, no buy.
Oh, it will come with Snake. If they don't, then it's totally
Big
worthless.
mistake.
Yeah,
Big
huge
mistake. If they
and
didn't-
then default ringtone and Snake, and then you're
that's
gonna
enough.
have,
Takes a long time to load. You see the loading screen Nokia
right
comes
right.
on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see the bars on the left and the right. Yeah. You can only store 200 contacts on this phone.
I don't understand this, but hey, more power to them if they want to re-release a phone. Maybe it's time. I mean, maybe they looked at like the NES Classic and like, oh, what can we do to tap into that nostalgia? Here's an old phone that does phone calls.
You can only call 30 people.
Yeah, T9. Oh, people are gonna have to learn how to text with the keypad. Do people
Yeah.
even know how to do that anymore?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah. All right, let's jump to our next section, the VR Minute. Oh, that's not the
That's
sound for that. That's
The VR Minute. Virtual reality this week.
all right. A bunch of stuff happening in virtual reality. First of all, we hear you guys. Jeremy and I are going to be talking about this more, but there have been. You have an Oculus, right? You have an
Yeah,
Oculus, and
yeah.
there have been widespread reports. A lot of people have had tracking issues with their Oculus Rift. I haven't.
I haven't either. This actually came up in the other podcast where, I had actually not even heard of this. But there is definitely there are definitely people having this problem.
And people have now been able to show that. So what they're calling is tracking is Guardian shift. There's a video of the Guardian shift over time shifting where it thinks you are. So relative positioning where you are now, it's still fine. But over time, where it thinks you are relative to where it thought you were in the beginning is mismatched. That's been captured on video. And Brendan Arib, who former CEO of Oculus,
It was $150 million.
yeah, he commented, finally made a public statement in the Reddit r/Oculus forum thread, saying that they're working on core software improvements that should hopefully address these issues. That's an acknowledgement of the issues, and it's a huge priority for their next releases, including one version 1.12, which will ship in February.
Right.
So I bet this is a case where it probably didn't affect the vast majority of people. If it did, I think they would have talked about it much sooner.
Right.
But it probably wasn't an easy problem to solve. And so making any statement acknowledging that doesn't do anything if you're already putting your top men on it.
Right.
I think they were probably waiting until they knew when they could say they would be able to solve it and when. And here they're saying next patch, end of the month, it's something they're addressing.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest case, right? They couldn't duplicate it, or they couldn't duplicate it reliably. So whenever that's the problem, then engineers are not quite sure where to attack. And then I think people are saying like, oh, just send up your PC hardware configuration. But then there's things like the room and all kinds of other stuff that might be affecting it. But hopefully, hopefully they get this solved, because that would really suck. I would be really pissed if that was the case with my Oculus.
Yeah. I want to ask you more about your VR experiences in Japan, your VR park experiences.
Sure.
As I was listening to you guys talk about it on the podcast when you were a guest with Jeremy and Kishore, I had so many questions. So let's run through. You were in Japan, and in Japan they have VR parks.
Yeah, so there's two main ones. One's in by Shinjuku Station, Shibuya, and then the other is in Odaiba. So they're different. They're run by different companies. I went to the one by Shibuya. So what you do is you go in and you pay admission for time. And I think I bought the cheaper one because I didn't think I was going to spend an hour or two in there.
How long was the cheaper one?
I think it was. I want to say it was like about $20 for about half hour to 45 minutes, something like that.
Right.
And what it's really kind of odd because they've cordoned it off into these different zones, right? So there's a bunch of different games. I want to say there was like maybe 6 or 8 of them.
Each in their own rooms, or just corners of a big
corners of like a big area, right? And some of them, you had to go inside. But the weird part about it was like there was one I did which was like a baseball thing where you held the Vive controller like a baseball bat, which was pretty awkward, quite frankly. But they were using Vives. They were using consumer hardware. Yeah, they were using consumer hardware, and then they gave you this like paper mask that you put on.
Gasket,
and so
they
had
10 packs, 100 packs of those.
Right. So and then they had like an attendant who was sitting at the PC and also held the cord for you, so you wouldn't trip over the cord. And the funny thing was they were like stylized to the game, which makes no sense because you're actually putting on the headset and you're not going to see any of it. So when you walked into the baseball thing, it was like this mini like baseball diamond that you walked into.
Okay.
And maybe it's like put you in the mindset that you were playing.
But it wasn't one-to-one with what you saw in the game. It was just themed
that way. Right.
Okay.
It's sort of like a backdrop. And so, there was that game. There was one. These are all original titles, and they're not available, as far as I know, in any one area. I forget what one of the companies, but the other company that's helping develop these games is Gree, which is for disclosure, is a company I used to work for a couple of years ago. So there's that. There was this one where it was like you were standing on the edge of a high rise, and it was kind of like almost like King Kong. Things were like flying at you, and you were shooting them down. But that was the one that you look down, and I can only stand on certain areas where I'll fall. Mm-hmm. And then the co-op game I was talking about was a couch co-op. So you have 4 people on the couch, and it was kind of like this Ghostbusters. I mean, it was Ghostbusters. Like I forget what they call it, like haunted house or something, but it was literally Slimer coming at you, right? And
when you were holding the Vive controller, were they mounted on like PVC pipe?
No. Every game, I didn't have any sort of like Wiimote type like tennis racket thing on it. I was just holding the Vive controller, and it was like a proton pack. right? Like I was shooting out like this, electricity.
Wait. So what you're physically holding though is just the controller.
Yeah, the controller in the game.
In the game.
Yeah,
so
in
they
the
didn't
game.
they didn't adapt the controller to any accessory.
No.
Any
Yeah.
okay,
So
got
this
it.
is all, as far as I could tell, all consumer hardware and like their own custom games. I think the big thing is obviously Japanese apartments really tiny. So this is not something you're going to have in your house.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting way of getting people exposure to the VR world. And there was one thing I saw was actually a lot of couples, which because most of the games were 2-player if you wanted to. And then the couch co-op, it was like they had 3 people, and then I got thrown in with that group. And like I said, I felt really bad for that group because you did have to sort of coordinate, and I was not that good at it. But
It's like there's an asymmetrical VR experience with PSVR where you are ghost busting, and then people tell you, the people who aren't in the VR headset tell you where to look.
Yeah, there was none of that. This was the attendants were there, kind of gave you a quick overview, and then you walked in. It's prominent on the sidewalk. I mean, there's a big sign that says VR Park. You have to go up the stairs. And even in the one in Odaiba, like outside, there's like standees and everything. So they were definitely trying to push it. When I was there, it was pretty busy. Like I said, it's kind of expensive.
For Japan, for $20 for half an hour. Yeah, it's still expensive for any type of experience. It is high-end arcade experience akin to the virtuality VR headset things that you paid $5 for. I guess it was $4 or $5 for 5-10 minutes in.
Right.
Back in the 90s.
Yeah.
It's the modern day equivalent of that. But you're right. Space, like what they can bring to it is like the investment in space.
Yeah, it was the space, and quite frankly, having someone there holding the cord for you was one of those. Yeah, because I mean, normally when we're playing, we're kind of wrapping our legs around and we're getting tripped up, or at least I am. And this was one of those cases where
it was a job offering.
Yeah,
I will go to your house and hold your
like a
VR
task
cord
rabbit,
for you while you play Space Pirate Trainer.
Oh, I know someone who put a hook actually up in the ceiling, but
it helps.
Yeah, but they. It was very much like, how can we easily get you into this?
Yeah.
And expose, and there was someone, as soon as you took off the headset, they would like be cleaning it and then getting ready for the next person.
Sure.
Games were very simple. I mean, this was kind of like the Wii Sports of VR. But
that's the thing that's a little disappointing to me.
Yeah.
Because it really feels like the demo experience, like going to a convention and getting and waiting in line, and here you're paying, but to get to play a short mini game and have the demo experience. And that's, I hope we would move beyond that. And I know companies, like
yeah, but I mean, we've been playing with since like the DK1, right? And
yeah,
so
it's true.
I think that we're kind of jaded in terms of what we want. There were people coming out of there like really excited about what they had
and that's
done.
great,
right?
And I think we didn't talk about it last week, but I'm glad that's happening in Japan. Like in the U.S., reports are that Oculus is closing down the vast majority of their kiosks in Best Buy, because there would be times, weeks at a time, where people wouldn't there's no one doing the demo.
Right.
I think at the
There's
Westfield
an embarrassment.
Mall, if you have a where the enthusiasts know, and what you're selling is going to be the next platform that Mark Zuckerberg said is the next post smartphone, post mobile, the next way you interface with computers, and your big flagship product not get used, like that's embarrassing.
Yeah.
And I know it's because it's expensive. And maybe there's an awareness problem. They're not doing it, like there aren't TV ads for VR yet, right? At the Westfield Mall in San Francisco, at the Microsoft store, they have that, and I always see lines for that. I think it's also a cultural thing. VR, there are a lot of Best Buys around the country, but VR really is a high end. It's an expensive hobby to get into. I wish we would see more VR parks in the States, things that have custom hardware. Backpacks, untethered experiences, not just custom software, but custom hardware, and also with accessories like the Vive Puck, the Vive Tracker coming out this year, developing games to really take advantage of accessories. That baseball game you talked about, if you use the Vive Tracker, you can put a real baseball bat in that and track it, and you can have a really immersive experience. And you don't even need to build in the thing that the Void is doing with the moving walls and like the 4D type elements, so it's spraying water, you and heat. Just having the space.
Yeah. Well, isn't there a company that just received an investment where they're actually doing like the rooms and they were talking about their technology is actually the wireless distribution of the signal. I can't remember it, but I'm sure someone is like screaming at their phone right now.
Well, TPcast is going to come out this year, and that's a Chinese company that's also wireless transmission.
Right.
And so
assuming you don't get brain cancer with this like non-FCC thing.
No,
like
it is FCC, 50 gigahertz.
Oh, it is?
It's
Okay,
fine.
all right,
Yeah. That's fine. It's just battery. You got the strap. But it's why when the Void did the Ghostbusters experience, the proton pack, the battery, the computing hardware being something you wear ties in the story.
Yep.
As long as if you're playing Indiana Jones, give the person wearing the VR goggles a satchel, and you can have the battery in the satchel, right? If you're Jack Bauer, you got the Jack pack.
Right.
Yeah. Right. The man bag. Build it in the story. Piece of space armor that you can have the battery packs in.
Right. I want the typing of the dead, like where you have the Dreamcast on your back and the keyboard in front of you. That's what I want.
The tracked floating keyboard. VR typing of the dead.
Yes.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
Like the law of infinite monkeys, it's at some game jam.
Yep.
That's VR typing of the dead is going to happen, and it's going to be a great day.
I'm gonna sign up right away. They won't be able to drag me off of it.
Yeah, well, the companies who are investing in physical VR experiences, roller coasters, theme parks for sure. I still have yet to ride a VR roller coaster.
I haven't ridden one either. Where I grew up in Ohio, there's Cedar Point, which is one of the biggest roller coaster parks. They did one on Iron Dragon, which quite frankly was not a good roller coaster. I think last year, and the reports I heard was it makes you really sick.
Really? Okay.
And so that was just kind of what I heard. I saw the story you posted where I think they're taking more of like an AR approach to it.
Yeah. So at Six Flags, both in LA and outside San Francisco in Vallejo, used to be Marine World, they have the Gear VR roller coaster rides, which as long as you have the tracking, the scripting of the sequence mapped to the ride itself, there's no reason it shouldn't be comfortable and should add to the experience. But now they're adding potentially AR functionality, which would mean you have the pass-through camera, and so you can see things happening and have some type of interactivity. That's the thing where I feel like would get dizzy, because with a pass-through camera, if it's not true AR with some type of, where you're seeing the real world and it's just through a lens, here because you're processing the video and there's latency in that video.
Oh, right.
I feel like that could give you some dizziness.
I guess it all depends on the latency then, huh?
Yeah. So, but I'm curious about it. And I want to try it.
Yeah. I want to know how many Gear VRs fly off people's heads during these roller coasters. I guess you see like hats and like phones and everything like every time
it must be locked
like a chin strap or something, or
I wonder how many like batteries run out or things pop out, mid ride, and you're just like nothing but a black screen.
Right. Oh, it's great.
Oh, okay.
It's like a giant tunnel.
Yeah, exactly. Have you tried Dear Angelica?
I have not. So I saw this in the notes, and then I read a quick article that I stopped reading because it started talking about the experience, and this is definitely something I'm going to do as soon as I get home.
You should absolutely do it as soon as you get home.
Yeah.
Jeremy's been praising it for a while. I finally got last week a chance to go through it.
It's not very long, right?
It's not. It's an Oculus Story Studio thing. Yeah. So this one features the Quill tool, which is Oculus's version of the 2D painting tool, that tilt brush. But it's for animation, and it's a wonderful story. They do a really good job. It really. I'm glad they're experimenting, because in these kind of different storytelling formats in VR, I just don't know how it's going to be sustainable. It really feels like bootstrapping the art form so that directors and content creators can get inspired. But there's no business model. Like, I don't think for how much money they spent and how many people have VR, it's not worth like paying $20 or $10 to view just this 5-minute short. Well,
that's kind of the problem we have with VR in any respect, right? I've been talking to a lot of investors who just say, if you're VR, make sure you have a low burn rate and ready to ride out the next, 5 years or something before profits really, take off. Like, if Oculus can support these initiatives, or maybe there's some like artistic grants, for people like pushing the things without an expectation of profitability, more like, what's going to stick. I think that's going to be more interesting. But
all right. And the last piece of news in the VR Minute is with AR. So Magic Leap, which we've talked about, some of the the leaks and rumors coming out of there in terms of where their prototype is, what stage. There's actually a photo of their hardware now. The first public photo of a working Magic Leap prototype, according to Business Insider,
Right.
was released last week. And it's the prototype that's the backpack, the hardware on a back.
Yeah.
The backpack. And it doesn't show you the lens. It
No.
doesn't show you the headset itself. I guess it does show you that there's something clamped to someone's head.
Yeah.
It doesn't tell me anything either way of like what this means for the consumer product.
Well, so the real concern, I think, with this particular photo getting out, and you'll see it basically looks like someone strapped a motherboard to someone's back, and he's holding one of those giant power packs, was that my understanding is at this point, they were supposed to be at a stage where there was much more portability. I think the original spec was something like 2 soda cans. And at this point, you'd be like Duff Man, right? Because you'd have like 20 of them around your waist to support all of this stuff. So, there's been a lot of discussion about how far behind they are from functional prototypes. And then, there's other legal action that's happening now. I think her name is Tannen Campbell, filed a sexual discrimination suit against them. She was brought on to, improve the profile and treatment of women at Magic Leap, and then filed for sexual discrimination. So that's not a good sign either. From the demos, people were saying, except for Beyonce, they were saying it was really impressive, but whether they can get it to sort of a shippable consumer product is really the big question. And now some people are saying like HoloLens is ahead of where they are right now.
Wow. And we haven't seen anything new from HoloLens since the developer unit was released, the $3,000 developer unit.
They had that new mount for the camera, where you can mount like a DSLR or something, or like a GoPro underneath the headset, and it can capture people using the device and what they probably see. Instead of like that first person, it's almost like a third person camera, which I thought was really cool. Like that, I think that's going to, even for like marketing videos, when you're trying to sort of sell the dream.
The mixed reality version
Right.
of AR.
Yeah.
Analog. Magic Leap CEO did comment on Twitter about this photo and said the photo isn't what you think it is, and says that it's actually an R&D test rig where we collect the room space data for the machine vision, machine learning work. Now, machine vision is hugely important to an AR device because it's not just about the lens system where you can see the real world and have the image imposed in the real world, but for that to work properly, you need to be able to track the real world, like the structure sensor, like what HoloLens does. And so maybe this is that equipment where they use to test that. The photo that is released doesn't show any markings. There's no QR codes in the wall. It just looks like normal carpet in the floor.
Right.
Nothing about this photo says, like, even with, even if they had something that looks like a consumer product, they would still be using, there's no reason not to use things that look like hacked
Internal
together
test.
hardware. It's for internal testing. So this doesn't tell me anything about Magic Leap. I'm going to wait till we're going to talk about it when they have something to announce.
Right. I mean, I sound kind of down on it. I mean, that and like Daiquiri had to lay off some people as well. Like, I want them to succeed. I mean, they raised out $1.4 billion in venture capital. So, if they succeed and they can do things, then that's great. It'll, have better penetration and we'll have better experiences. So, hopefully this is all kind of just a bad news cycle for them.
All right. And I think that actually does it for us this week. Let me actually give a shout out to our sponsor for this week's episode of This Is Only a Test, and that's Crizal No Glare lenses. If you wear glasses, you know that sometimes you end up focusing more on what's on your lenses than what's going on around you. That's why you might want Crizal No Glare lenses. They are life tested to provide the most complete protection against glare, scratches, smudges, dust, and water. So you don't have to worry about getting your glasses rendered useless after a rainy day, or dirty when you take them on and off, or getting scratched when you clean them on your shirt. Crizal no glare lenses stay clear and reduce distracting glare so your friends and family can actually see your eyes, not your glasses. Go to crizal.com, that's CRIZAL.com, and start living life in the clear, and thank them for sponsoring and bringing you this week's episode. And I want to thank, of course, Steve Lin here for joining me for this duo cast.
Yeah, thanks
I've done
for
this a
having
couple
me.
times with Jeremy, but I feel like doing a duo cast with you just as great.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Hopefully you guys did too.
Yeah, and thank you out there for listening as well. I believe Jeremy and Kishore will both be back next week, and we'll hear about their adventures. But until next time, we do have a raw outro. Again, if you want to contribute an outro that we'll play at the end of the show, just search tested raw outro sound file. Take you to our forums. We can download the source file, do an audio edit, take something funny we said or embarrassing that we said on the podcast and edit it into an outro. And this one is made by Micro Apple, and I have not listened to it yet.
Hi there, I didn't see you.
Let's agree on one thing. Butt cracks are very unattractive.
I saw Joey's. I did. No, I saw it.
That's the perfect example. We'll see you next time.